The transit corridor to the Galactic Assembly's central chamber was an architectural marvel that would have impressed most species. Massive crystalline structures twisted in impossible geometries, defying traditional understanding of structural physics. But Dr. Elena Rodriguez noticed only the subtle details, the micro-vibrations in the quantum-locked walls, the barely perceptible electromagnetic fluctuations that most beings would miss entirely. Her neural implants, a cutting-edge hybrid of biological and quantum computing, processed the environmental data with lightning speed. Each subtle shift, each microscopic change in atmospheric pressure, was cataloged and analyzed in milliseconds. To the casual observer, she appeared calm, a lone human among the most powerful beings in the known galaxy. In reality, she was a living, breathing intelligence network, collecting and processing information with every breath. The delegation preceding her had been a disaster. Ambassador Thomas Chen, a veteran diplomat, had been systematically dismantled by the Assembly's interrogation protocols. His presentation on human achievements had been met with barely concealed derision. The Kalar representatives had chittered in their crystalline language, their biomechanical limbs creating a sound like fracturing glass, a sound of mockery. But Elena Rodriguez was different. As she walked, the nanofabric of her diplomatic suit shifted imperceptibly. Adaptive camouflage technology, developed in the underground research labs of New Jakarta, allowed the fabric to interface with her neural implants. It wasn't just clothing. It was an extension of her cognitive capabilities, capable of real-time data analysis and environmental adaptation. The chamber doors opened with a sound that was more felt than heard, a quantum resonance that vibrated at a frequency just beyond human hearing. But Elena's augmentations caught every nuance, every potential threat. Inside, the Assembly representatives were already positioned. The Kalar Confederacy occupied the eastern sector, their crystalline bodies refracting light in complex patterns that served as both communication and intimidation. To the west, the Zen Collective's neural network representatives formed a living, pulsing mass of interconnected consciousness. The Orion Synergy delegation sat at the center, their silicon-based forms creating a stark geometric contrast to the organic and crystalline beings around them. They didn't even try to hide their contempt. The primary arbiter, a massive entity from the Nexus Concordat, raised 3 of its 7 manipulative appendages. The gesture was both a greeting and a warning, a diplomatic dance that had maintained galactic political balance for millennia. Dr. Elena Rodriguez of Earth, the voice emerged not from a mouth, but from a complex series of resonance chambers that translated thought into sound. You stand before the Assembly to address the potential termination of humanity's provisional membership. Your species has demonstrated consistent unpredictability. Unpredictability. The word hung in the air like a weapon. Elena knew the stakes. Humanity's membership in the Galactic Assembly was more than a political formality. It was access to technologies, trade routes, and information networks that could make or break a developing civilization. Exclusion meant isolation, a potential death sentence for a species just beginning to understand its place in the cosmic ecosystem. But she wasn't here to beg. She was here to challenge everything they believed about humanity. Her neural implants began to sync with the chamber's communication matrix. Quantum-encrypted data streams that would be invisible to most species began to flow around her, creating a complex web of information that she could manipulate at will. The Kalar representatives shifted uneasily. Something was different about this human. Something unexpected. Respected representatives of the Galactic Assembly, Elena began, her voice carrying a precision that seemed to cut through the chamber's complex acoustic design. I am here to present evidence that will fundamentally challenge your understanding of humanity. A holographic display activated behind her, not by her command, but through a complex series of quantum entanglement protocols that she had personally developed. The first image appeared, and in that moment, the entire chamber realized this would be no ordinary hearing. This would be a declaration of humanity's true potential. The first holographic projection materialized with surgical precision. It wasn't just an image. It was a living, breathing reconstruction of data that seemed to defy the very laws of information transfer. Quantum infiltration is a concept most species consider impossible, Elena began, her voice cutting through the chamber's stunned silence. What you're about to witness is the systematic deconstruction of your most secure communication networks. The hologram exploded into a complex, three-dimensional web of interconnected data streams. Each luminescent thread represented a different alien communication channel. The Kalar's quantum encryption protocols, the Zin Collective's neural network transmission routes, the Orion Synergy's hyperdimensional communication grids, and every single one of them was marked in bright crimson, compromised. The Kalar representatives began to vibrate, a response that, for their crystalline biology, was equivalent to human panic. Their lead delegate, a being known as Sar Prime, attempted to interrupt. This is impossible. Our encryption is irrelevant. Elena finished, her neural implants already anticipating the argument. Not only did we penetrate your networks, but we've been monitoring your communications for decades. A series of personal communications began to play. Intimate conversations, classified strategic discussions, private moments never meant to be shared. Each projection was accompanied by precise metadata: time, location, encryption method, point of breach. The chamber descended into chaos. The Zin Collective's neural network began to pulse erratically. Their collective consciousness was experiencing something unprecedented: total vulnerability. Millions of interconnected minds suddenly realized they were completely exposed. Elena continued her methodical presentation. Our infiltration wasn't just technological. It was a comprehensive study of communication itself. We didn't just break your codes, we understood the fundamental psychology behind them. Another holographic display activated. This one showed a complex algorithm that seemed to dance and shift, adapting in real time. It was a visual representation of humanity's most dangerous weapon: adaptive intelligence. Traditional encryption relies on mathematical complexity, Elena explained. Humanity approached the problem differently. We studied communication as a living, breathing organism. Each encryption method is a language with its own grammar, its own psychology. The algorithm began to demonstrate its capabilities. It would encounter a security protocol, analyze it instantaneously, and then find multiple ways to bypass it. Not through brute force, but through elegant, almost intuitive understanding. The Orion Synergy delegates, typically the most stoic of the assembly, began to show signs of genuine concern. Their silicon-based neural networks were running rapid threat assessments, and none of the potential scenarios looked favorable for the existing galactic order. "Let me be explicitly clear," Elena said, her voice dropping to a register that seemed to vibrate at a frequency that demanded attention. "We are not here to demonstrate our ability to spy. We are here to show that your understanding of intelligence, of communication, of potential, is fundamentally limited." A new holographic display showed the journey of human technological development. But it wasn't a linear progression. It was a chaotic, almost fractal representation of innovation. Each breakthrough was connected to multiple seemingly unrelated fields: biology influencing quantum physics, psychological research driving computational design. The Kalar's communication channels began to show signs of active disruption. Elena's presentation wasn't just a demonstration. It was a live cyber operation showing the depth of human infiltration. "Your communication networks," she said, "are built on the assumption of predictability. Humanity introduces an element of controlled chaos that your systems cannot comprehend." To demonstrate, she activated a series of cascading algorithmic attacks, not to cause damage, but to show capability. Encryption layers dissolved, communication channels were routed, entire secure networks temporarily destabilized, all within seconds. The chamber was no longer just watching a presentation. They were witnessing a fundamental challenge to their understanding of technological capability. Sar Prime of the Kalar finally spoke, its crystalline structure showing visible fractures of stress. "What do you want?" Alina's smile was something between a diplomatic gesture and a predatory response. We want you to understand. Humanity is not a species to be categorized or controlled. We are a force of transformation. The first part of her presentation concluded, and the Galactic Assembly realized, with a combination of terror and grudging respect, that nothing would ever be the same again. The technological demonstration was about to enter a realm that would fundamentally shatter the Assembly's comprehension of innovation. Alina's neural interface activated a series of holographic projections that seemed to bend the very fabric of perceived reality. The first model materialized, a complex, shimmering representation of a matter restructuring technology that made the Assembly's most advanced systems look like primitive stone tools. Quantum adaptive matter manipulation, she announced, her voice a precise instrument of scientific revelation, not just theoretical, fully operational. The hologram began to demonstrate impossible transformations. A block of pure titanium dissolved and reformed at the atomic level, restructuring itself into increasingly complex configurations. But this wasn't simple molecular rearrangement. This was fundamental reality manipulation that defied every known scientific principle in the galactic database. The Orion Synergy's lead representative, a being composed of intricate silicon-based neural networks, leaned forward. Its sensory arrays were working overtime, struggling to comprehend the implications. Each transformation, Alina continued, represents a breakthrough that challenges the fundamental understanding of matter itself. We don't just change materials. We communicate with them. A secondary projection showed the development process. It wasn't a linear progression of scientific research, but a chaotic web of interconnected innovations. Biological research interfaced with quantum mechanics. Psychological studies influenced material science. Cultural anthropology became a key to technological breakthrough. The Kalar delegates began to vibrate, a clear sign of profound technological distress. Their crystalline structures seemed to pulse with a mixture of fear and reluctant admiration. But Alina was just getting started. The next demonstration focused on faster-than-light communication, a holy grail of galactic technology that had remained tantalizingly out of reach for millennia. The holographic display showed a communication network that didn't just transmit information. It essentially folded spacetime around the message. Traditional faster-than-light communication relies on quantum entanglement. Alina explained, "We've developed something entirely different. We don't transmit information. We create localized reality bridges." The demonstration was breathtaking. Information appeared to move not just faster than light, but seemingly outside the traditional constraints of space-time. Messages could be sent not just across vast distances, but potentially across different quantum states simultaneously. The Zen Collective's neural network began to show signs of critical overload. Their interconnected consciousness was struggling to process the implications. This wasn't just a technological breakthrough. It was a fundamental reimagining of communication itself. But the most important aspect, Alina said, her voice dropping to a register that demanded absolute attention, is not the technology itself. It's how we developed it. The holographic display shifted, showing a chaotic series of research environments. Unlike the methodical, hierarchical research structures of other galactic civilizations, human research looked like controlled chaos. Multiple teams working simultaneously, cross-disciplinary collaboration, radical ideas welcomed and tested, rather than immediately dismissed. A series of breakthrough moments played out, each one a testament to human creativity. A materials scientist having a breakthrough while watching children play. A quantum physicist finding inspiration in musical composition. A communication theorist drawing insights from evolutionary biology. The Orion Synergy delegates began running rapid threat assessments. Their computational models couldn't predict the potential implications of this approach to innovation. "We don't innovate in straight lines," Alina declared. "We innovate through connection, through seeing relationships where others see only separation." Another projection showed the human approach to problem solving, where other species would create complex, rigid methodological frameworks. Humans introduced an element of adaptive creativity. Problems weren't solved. They were reimagined. The Kalar's communication channels began to show signs of significant stress. Their most advanced predictive algorithms were failing to comprehend the presentation. "What you're witnessing," Elena said, her neural implants now fully interfaced with the chamber's communication matrix, "is not just a technological demonstration. It's a fundamental challenge to your understanding of innovation itself." The chamber fell into a profound silence. The assembly representatives, beings who had considered themselves the pinnacle of galactic civilization, were experiencing something unprecedented. Total, complete intellectual humility. And humanity was just getting started. The technological presentation gave way to something far more unsettling, a comprehensive psychological profile that would expose the true depth of human potential. Elena's neural interface activated a holographic display that was less a presentation and more a living, breathing dissection of human consciousness. Unlike the clinical, data-driven approaches of other species, this was a raw, dynamic exploration of humanity's psychological landscape. Intelligence is not measured by computational speed, she began, but by adaptive capacity. The first projection showed a series of impossible scenarios, situations that would break most species. A human colony ship stranded in an uncharted region of space, with 87% of its systems destroyed. Traditional probability models would predict total extinction. Instead, the crew systematically transformed ship components, rewrote their own survival algorithms, and not only survived but established a thriving settlement. The Zen Collective's neural network began to pulse erratically. Their computational models couldn't process the irrational variables of human survival. Another scene materialized. A research team on a hostile planet with atmospheric conditions that should have been immediately fatal. Instead of accepting death, the humans began a rapid, improvisational process of biological and technological adaptation. They didn't just survive. They began to fundamentally alter their own biological systems in real time. "Emotional intelligence is our greatest computational tool," Elena declared. Her voice carried a frequency that seemed to penetrate beyond mere sound, a neural resonance that demanded attention. A holographic display shifted, showing something unprecedented. Psychological response models that didn't just predict behavior but demonstrated a fluid, adaptive intelligence that could fundamentally reshape itself in response to new information. Where other species had rigid decision-making protocols, humans introduced an element of controlled chaos. Their neural pathways didn't just process information, they reimagined it. A problem wasn't a barrier, it was an opportunity for radical transformation. The Kalar representatives began to vibrate, a response that, for their crystalline biology, indicated profound existential stress. Their most advanced predictive algorithms were failing catastrophically. Elena continued her demonstration. Most species see challenges as problems to be solved. Humans see them as opportunities to evolve. A series of scenarios played out. Economic collapse, planetary environmental disaster, technological setbacks. Each situation that would crush most civilizations became a catalyst for human innovation. The Orion Synergy delegates, typically the most stoic of the assembly, began running rapid threat assessments. Their computational models were generating increasingly alarming predictions. The psychological profile wasn't just a presentation. It was a live demonstration of humanity's most dangerous capability, adaptive intelligence that defied traditional understanding. "We don't just think," Elena said, her neural implants now fully interfaced with the chamber's communication matrix. "We reimagine entire systems of thought." Another projection showed something truly remarkable. Human problem-solving wasn't linear. It was a complex, fractal process that could simultaneously explore multiple solution paths. Where other species would commit massive resources to a single approach, humans would generate hundreds of potential solutions, testing and adapting in real time. The Zen Collective's interconnected consciousness began to show signs of critical overload. Their understanding of intelligence was being fundamentally challenged. "Emotions are not a weakness," Elena declared. They are our most sophisticated computational tool. The holographic display began to show how human emotional intelligence allowed for solutions that pure computational approaches would never discover. Empathy as a strategic asset, creativity as a survival mechanism, psychological flexibility as a form of advanced technological adaptation. A series of breakthrough moments played out, scientific discoveries inspired by artistic expression, technological innovations triggered by emotional experiences, complex problem-solving emerging from seemingly unrelated human interactions. The chamber was no longer just watching a presentation. They were witnessing a fundamental challenge to their understanding of intelligence itself. The Kalar's communication channels began to show signs of significant stress. Their most advanced predictive algorithms were generating increasingly erratic results. "What you're experiencing," Elena said, her voice dropping to a frequency that seemed to vibrate at the edge of perception, "is the realization that everything you understood about intelligence is fundamentally incomplete." The Assembly representatives, beings who had considered themselves the pinnacle of galactic civilization, were experiencing something unprecedented. Total, complete psychological disorientation, and humanity was just beginning to demonstrate its true potential. The psychological presentation dissolved, replaced by something far more terrifying. A comprehensive map of human infiltration that would redefine the very concept of galactic influence. Infiltration, Elena began, her voice a precision instrument of revelation, is not about force. It's about understanding. The first holographic projection was a living, breathing network of connections that seemed to defy every known model of political and cultural interaction. Thousands of threads, each representing a human agent, asset, or influence point, began to illuminate the chamber. These were not traditional spies or operatives. They were educators, artists, traders, researchers, diplomats, entrepreneurs, individuals who had been strategically positioned across multiple alien civilizations, not through centralized command, but through a decentralized, almost organic network of human potential. The Kalar representatives began to pulse with a frequency that suggested complete systemic shock. Their most advanced surveillance systems had been comprehensively outmaneuvered. "We didn't infiltrate your systems," Elena declared. "We became part of your ecosystem." Each connection told a story. A human xenobiologist who had become a trusted advisor to the Zin Collective's research division. An artist whose cultural exchange programs had systematically reshaped communication protocols in 3 major star systems. A trader whose economic innovations had subtly restructured entire galactic trade routes. The Orion Synergy delegates ran increasingly frantic computational analyses. Their threat assessment models were generating results that defied traditional understanding. The holographic display began to show the depth of human influence. It wasn't about controlling information. It was about fundamentally reshaping how information was perceived, processed, and understood. A series of seemingly unrelated events began to play out. A musical composition that had inadvertently solved a complex quantum communication problem. An archaeological study that had revealed critical vulnerabilities in alien defensive systems. A philosophical treatise that had completely restructured an entire civilization's approach to technological development. Most species see infiltration as a military or intelligence operation, Elena continued. Humanity understands it as a complex, adaptive ecosystem of influence. The chamber watched in stunned silence as the full extent of human reach became apparent. These weren't isolated incidents. This was a comprehensive, almost living network of influence that had been growing for decades. The Zin Collective's neural network began to show signs of critical overload. Their most advanced predictive models were generating increasingly chaotic results. Humanity had introduced a level of complexity that their systems simply could not comprehend. Another projection showed the true genius of human infiltration. Unlike traditional espionage, which sought to extract or control information, human agents were fundamentally transformative. They didn't just observe. They inspired, challenged, and fundamentally reshaped the systems they entered. A human xenolinguist who had completely reimagined communication protocols, for an entire alien diplomatic corps, a biochemist whose research had transformed medical understanding across multiple star systems, an economist whose innovative models had restructured entire galactic trade networks. "We are not a species that conquers," Alina said, her voice dropping to a frequency that seemed to vibrate at the edge of perception. "We are a species that transforms." The Kalar's communication channels began to show signs of complete systemic breakdown. Their most advanced encryption and surveillance systems were revealing their own fundamental limitations. The holographic display continued to expand, showing layer after layer of human influence. Each connection was not just a point of data, but a complex, adaptive relationship that defied traditional understanding of political and cultural interaction. The Orion Synergy delegates were now running computational analyses at unprecedented speeds. Their threat models were generating results that suggested something far more profound than traditional infiltration. Humanity had not invaded. They had integrated. "What you're witnessing," Elena declared, her neural implants now fully interfaced with the chamber's communication matrix, "is the realization that influence is not about control. It's about fundamental transformation." The assembly representatives, beings who had considered themselves the masters of galactic politics, were experiencing something unprecedented. Total, complete strategic disorientation. And humanity was just beginning to demonstrate the true depth of its potential for systemic transformation. The final projection hung in the chamber, a living, breathing network of human potential that suggested something far more terrifying than traditional conquest. The complete reimagining of galactic civilization itself. The infiltration presentation dissolved, replaced by something far more profound. An existential challenge that would redefine the very concept of civilizational potential. Elena Rodriguez stood at the epicenter of the chamber, her presence alone a statement of unprecedented complexity. The holographic displays began to weave a narrative that was less a presentation and more a fundamental deconstruction of galactic understanding. Existential potential is not measured by technological advancement, she began, but by the capacity to fundamentally reimagine existence itself. The first projection materialized, a comprehensive model of human potential that defied every known computational framework. It wasn't a linear progression of development, but a complex, multidimensional representation of adaptive capability. Scenarios began to play out. Planetary environments that should have been impossible to inhabit, transformed. Technological limitations that seemed insurmountable, systematically dismantled. Social structures that were believed to be immutable, completely restructured. The Kalar representatives began to vibrate at a frequency that suggested complete systemic shock. Their most advanced predictive models were generating results that challenged the very foundation of their understanding of evolutionary potential. "We are not just a species," Elena declared. "We are a living, adaptive system of perpetual transformation." The holographic display expanded, showing humanity's approach to existential challenges. Where other species saw limitations, humans saw opportunities for radical reimagining. A colony ship trapped in a radiation-saturated region of space didn't just survive. It developed entirely new biological and technological paradigms to not just endure, but thrive. The Zen Collective's neural network began to pulse with increasing intensity. Their computational models were generating increasingly chaotic and unpredictable results. Another projection showed something truly unprecedented. Humanity's approach to species-level challenges was not about preservation, but about continuous, radical adaptation. Environmental collapse became an opportunity for technological innovation. Technological limitations became a catalyst for biological transformation. Most species seek to maintain. Elena continued, her voice carrying a resonance that seemed to penetrate beyond mere sound. "We seek to evolve." The chamber watched as scenario after scenario played out. A human research team encountering a quantum anomaly that would have destroyed most civilizations, instead using it as an opportunity to develop entirely new models of physical interaction. A colony facing total ecological collapse, transforming their entire biological and technological infrastructure in a matter of generations. The Orion Synergy delegates were now running computational analyses at unprecedented speeds. Their threat assessment models were generating results that suggested something far more profound than traditional evolutionary development. Humanity wasn't just adapting. They were fundamentally reimagining the concept of adaptation itself. The holographic display began to show the true depth of human potential. It wasn't about technological advancement or biological development. It was about a fundamental capacity for radical transformation that defied every known model of species development. "We don't just solve problems," Alina said, her neural implants now fully interfaced with the chamber's communication matrix. "We fundamentally reimagine the nature of problem-solving itself." Scenarios of human innovation began to cascade. A medical breakthrough that didn't just cure a disease, but completely restructured understanding of biological systems. An environmental solution that transformed not just a planetary ecosystem, but the very concept of ecological interaction. The Kalar's communication channels began to show signs of complete systemic breakdown. Their most advanced predictive and analytical systems were revealing their own fundamental limitations. The final projection was something truly terrifying. A comprehensive model of human potential that suggested something far beyond traditional understanding of species development. It wasn't a projection of what humanity could become. It was a living, breathing representation of continuous, radical transformation. "What you're witnessing," Alina declared, her voice dropping to a frequency that seemed to vibrate at the edge of perception, "is the realization that potential is not a destination. It is a continuous state of becoming." The Assembly representatives, beings who had considered themselves the pinnacle of galactic civilization, were experiencing something unprecedented. Total, complete existential disorientation. And humanity was just beginning to demonstrate the true depth of its transformative potential. The final image hung in the chamber. A complex, multidimensional representation of human potential that suggested something far more terrifying than traditional evolutionary development. A complete reimagining of what it means to exist. The chamber of the Galactic Assembly transformed into a crucible of existential tension. Alina Rodriguez stood at its center, no longer just a presenter, but a living embodiment of humanity's challenge to galactic civilization. "Confidence is the greatest limitation of any civilization," she began, her voice a precision instrument of intellectual warfare. The holographic displays erupted into a cascading series of projections that systematically dismantled every foundational assumption of the Assembly's power structure. Each image was a weapon, each data point a surgical strike against millennia of established galactic hierarchy. The first projection showed the complete economic mapping of existing galactic trade routes. But this was no ordinary economic analysis. It was a living, breathing representation of how human economic agents had systematically introduced adaptive algorithms that were fundamentally reshaping interstellar commerce. Trade routes that had been stable for centuries began to shift in real time. Economic networks that seemed immutable started to reconfigure themselves. The Orion Synergy delegates watched in horror as their most sophisticated economic models were revealed to be nothing more than brittle constructs. "We don't compete," Alina declared. "We transform the very nature of competition itself." The Kalar representatives began to vibrate at a frequency that suggested complete systemic panic. Their crystalline structures seemed to be fracturing under the weight of intellectual and strategic revelation. Another projection materialized. A comprehensive breakdown of military and defensive capabilities across multiple star systems. But this was not a traditional threat assessment. It was a demonstration of how human strategic thinking had systematically identified and exploited fundamental vulnerabilities in existing defensive frameworks. Defensive systems that had been considered impenetrable were shown to have critical weaknesses, not through traditional military might, but through a comprehensive understanding of systemic complexity that defied traditional strategic thinking. The Zen Collective's neural network began to pulse with increasing intensity. Their most advanced predictive models were generating results that suggested something far more terrifying than traditional military threat. Humanity wasn't preparing for conflict. They were fundamentally reimagining the concept of strategic interaction. Power is not about control, Elena continued, her neural implants now fully interfaced with the chamber's communication matrix. It's about adaptive potential. The holographic displays began to show a series of scenarios that systematically challenged every existing model of galactic governance. Human diplomatic agents had not just participated in existing political structures, they had introduced elements of complexity that were fundamentally transforming those structures. Diplomatic protocols that had been stable for millennia were shown to be nothing more than fragile constructs. Political alliances that seemed immutable were revealed to be susceptible to nuanced, adaptive human intervention. The Kalar's communication channels began to show signs of complete systemic breakdown. Their most advanced predictive and analytical systems were revealing their own fundamental limitations. Another projection demonstrated something truly unprecedented. A comprehensive model of human strategic potential that suggested something far beyond traditional understanding of political and military capability. It wasn't about conquest. It was about fundamental transformation. "What you're witnessing," Elena said, her voice dropping to a frequency that seemed to vibrate at the edge of perception, "is the systematic deconstruction of your confidence." The assembly representatives watched as scenario after scenario played out. Each demonstration was a systematic dismantling of their most fundamental assumptions about power, governance, and strategic potential. The Aura and Synergy delegates were now running computational analyses at unprecedented speeds. Their threat assessment models were generating results that suggested something far more profound than traditional strategic challenge. Humanity wasn't just presenting an alternative. They were fundamentally challenging the very concept of established power. The final projection was a living, breathing representation of human potential that defied every known model of civilizational development. It wasn't a linear progression of power, but a complex, adaptive network of potential that could reshape entire systems with minimal direct intervention. "Confidence," Elena declared, "is the greatest vulnerability of any established system." The chamber fell into a profound silence. The assembly representatives, beings who had considered themselves the masters of galactic civilization, were experiencing something unprecedented. Total, complete strategic disorientation. And humanity was just beginning to demonstrate the true depth of its transformative potential. The final image hung in the chamber. A complex, multidimensional representation of strategic potential that suggested something far more terrifying than traditional models of power and governance. A complete reimagining of what it means to have power. The final presentation was not a conclusion, but a beginning. A fundamental challenge that would redefine the entire concept of galactic civilization. Elena Rodriguez stood at the epicenter of absolute silence. The assembly chamber, which had once been a symbol of galactic power and hierarchical order, now felt like a crucible of existential transformation. "Collaboration is not about agreement," she began, her voice a precision instrument of cosmic revelation. "It's about the capacity to fundamentally reimagine potential." The holographic displays erupted into a living, breathing representation of humanity's ultimate proposal. This was not a diplomatic submission, but a comprehensive redesign of galactic interaction itself. The first projection showed a model of cooperation that defied every existing framework of interstellar relations. It wasn't a hierarchical structure, but a dynamic, adaptive network of potential, where each civilization could contribute and transform simultaneously. The Kalar representatives began to pulse with a frequency that suggested both terror and reluctant fascination. Their most advanced predictive models were generating results that challenged everything they understood about collaborative potential. "We are not offering an alliance," Elena declared. "We are proposing a fundamental reimagining of what civilization can become." Scenarios began to play out, complex, multi-layered demonstrations of how human approaches could transform existing galactic systems. Economic models that didn't just redistribute resources, but fundamentally restructured the concept of value. Technological exchanges that weren't about transfer, but about mutual transformation. The Zen Collective's neural network began to oscillate with increasing intensity. Their computational models were generating outcomes that suggested something far beyond traditional understanding of cooperative potential. Another projection materialized, a comprehensive breakdown of how human collaborative approaches could address fundamental challenges that had paralyzed galactic civilization for millennia. Climate restoration projects that didn't just solve environmental challenges, but reimagined the relationship between technological civilization and planetary ecosystems. Most species see challenges as problems to be solved, Elena continued, her neural implants now fully interfaced with the chamber's communication matrix. We see them as opportunities for mutual transformation. The Orion Synergy delegates were running computational analyses at unprecedented speeds. Their threat assessment models were generating results that suggested something far more profound than traditional collaborative frameworks. Humanity wasn't just proposing cooperation. They were fundamentally challenging the very concept of how civilizations interact. The holographic displays began to show a living, breathing representation of potential that defied every known model of interstellar relations. Communication networks that didn't just transmit information, but created dynamic spaces of mutual understanding. Economic systems that weren't about competition, but about collective potential. The Kalar's communication channels began to show signs of complete systemic recalibration. Their most advanced predictive systems were revealing their own fundamental limitations. What you're witnessing, Elena said, her voice dropping to a frequency that seemed to vibrate at the edge of perception, is not a proposal. It is an invitation to reimagine existence itself. The final projection was something truly unprecedented. A comprehensive model of collaborative potential that suggested something far beyond traditional understanding of interstellar relations. It wasn't about dominance. It wasn't about submission. It was about continuous, mutual transformation. Scenario after scenario played out. Technological exchanges that didn't just share knowledge, but created entirely new paradigms of understanding. Cultural interactions that weren't about assimilation, but about mutual enrichment. Scientific collaborations that didn't just advance individual civilizations, but fundamentally expanded the concept of knowledge itself. The assembly representatives watched, suspended between terror and awe. "We are not asking for your permission," Elena declared. "We are presenting the inevitability of transformation." The chamber fell into a profound silence. The beings who had considered themselves the masters of galactic civilization were experiencing something unprecedented. Total, complete existential recalibration. The final image hung in the space, a complex, multidimensional representation of collaborative potential that suggested something far more profound than traditional models of interstellar relations. A complete reimagining of what it means to exist as a civilization. In that moment, the Galactic Assembly understood a fundamental truth. Humanity was not just another species to be categorized or controlled. Humanity was a force of cosmic transformation. And they were just beginning.